Thank you so much for joining us, Taryn.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Joy. Longtime listener. I love the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we talked a long time ago. I feel like it might have been in the pandemic. You interviewed me for a piece. It feels like quite some years ago. So it's been some time since we chatted.
Yeah, it's crazy because the pandemic was like, it started 5 years ago, but it feels like it's been a lot less time than that. So it's really great to reconnect.
Yes, yes. So tell the people who you are and a little bit about your background as a music journalist.
Yes. So, hello, everyone. I am Taryn Finley. I am a culture reporter. I've been doing this for over a decade so far. I covered a lot of music in my role as Black Voices editor and senior culture reporter at HuffPost, especially a lot in regards to R&B and retrospective looks into hip hop. I did a lot for the 50th anniversary of hip hop coverage over there. And music, specifically Black music, has been such a huge through line in my reporting because it's been such a huge through line in my life. I'm currently writing about it for my own personal Substack. Let me plug that first at let's stay connected.substack.com. Refinery 29, Exo Nicole, Contraband Camp, Essence, and a few other places. Just type in my name, you'll find my words.
Yeah, so this definitely has been, it feels like you are someone who has had your finger on the pulse of conversations around Black music, which is why we're very excited to have this conversation with you. So we are gathering today for a very special occasion because both Mama's Gun and Who is Jill Scott are both celebrating 25 years. So can you talk about the impact of these albums and why you think they still have such staying power even a quarter of a century later?
2000 was such a year for heavy hitting albums. I mean, obviously, Who is Jill Scott? The Jill Scott's debut album came out earlier that year, and then later in November, Mama's Gone. Just to back up into like this kind of window in time where neo soul was having such a huge moment. I mean, we have work from D'Angelo, Bilal, um, Lauren Hill coming out and really redefining and reshaping how we listen to this genre on the radio and in within quote unquote mainstream. So when we look at, I'll start with Who is Jill Scott. This is Jill Scott's debut album. We hear her bust on the scene, at that live performance with the Roots, the iconic "My name is Jillscott," and her making this introduction in such a soulful, sultry, seductive, and really just like it feels almost, her debut album felt almost like honey. I mean, not to be too cliche, but she even has a song on that album called Honey Molasses, and that was such a great descriptor for not only the texture of her voice in her lyrics, but also how it was received. Right? She's talking about love. She's talking about sex. She's talking about being desired, and this is such a huge thing because not only is she a Black woman, but she's also plus size. And during the 2000s, we see sex being sold and toted as a thing that is, that only, hyper, fit in super skinny, uh, 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 conventionally attractive, quote unquote, people lean into the Model S, the all of that. And Jill is like, hey, I'm fine as hell. And not only am I fine, but I enjoy sex. My man enjoys sex with me. And not only that, we enjoy being in love together. And it isn't in a way that it is from the male's gaze, but more so like she centers herself in this conversation. Similarly with Erykah Badu and Mama's Gun. Now, the difference with when it comes to Mama's Gun, however, is that Erykah Badu, this was her sophomore album, and it released to kind of tepid reviews. You know, you had half of the half of the critics saying that they loved it, and you know that it was experimental, and you know, of course, it leaned into this Afro futuristic sound and narrative. And Erica wrote this album, most of this album, completely herself. And then you have the other half who are like, what is this? This isn't a Baduism. You know, this is a flop commercially, even though it sold, went on to sold 1 million records the following year, which, you know, that, you know, numbers are really subjective at this point. But you see Erica not only censoring herself in her experience, but also breaking away from the labels and narratives that the industry really tried to confine her to when she released Baduism. And you know, I could go on, but I feel like these two, there's so much to say about it, and I know we're gonna get into both of these bodies of work even more so.
Yeah. So, Taryn, you probably have a better sense of this, but what is the actual history of how we got to neo soul? Like, because there had already been like a steady stream of R&B, but this did feel like a departure from that in some ways. So, is there somebody who's really credited with the beginnings of neo soul, and how did we get there?
That's a really good question. I don't know if there's one specific person. And if there is, then, you know, listeners, please come out and, you know, correct me and let me know. But, you know, like I said, we had, especially in this corridor of the 90s and early 2000s, such a breadth of artists coming out. You have D'Angelo with Voodoo, and you have Bilal, Raphael Sadiq, so many artists who leaned into the Black sounds that we have heard from generations before, you know, like a Billie Holiday, like an Aretha Franklin, like a Patti LaBelle, and putting again this kind of Afro futuristic yet very grounded and earthy undertone in it. And I think one really beautiful thing about neo soul and what we really start hearing, especially as we're turning into the new millennium, we start hearing a lot of live instrumentation from these artists, and not only that, but also collaboration. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't uncommon to hear or see a Raphael Sadiq and D'Angelo collaborating, or a Erykah Badu and Questlove in the studio. You know, a lot of times there was this communal feeling of soul that they came together to create, that really brought out the heart of neo soul, and I think is was evident then, and you know, even years later now, as we listen to all of these records and listen to all of these artists, that you know that sound is so evident. And you know, I know we'll get into this later, but there are a lot of artists that are sampling and trying to recreate those sounds now.
What do you feel like was happening in the R&B and hip hop space that really gave way to neo soul?
Oh wow. I mean, we were seeing subgenres come out the woodwork, you know, like of course R&B itself had such a moment in the 90s where you have, you know, these groups like Black and Boys to Men, and and their sound became, um, their sound was really the sound of the decade. When you thought about, or when you turned on the radio, the crooners were really the ones who were winning the airways, which was such a beautiful thing. But it couldn't be, just about, not necessarily saying that, these artists were super one dimensional or anything, but it couldn't just be about, um, you know, um, just sex, or just love, or just, it had to take it had to take another step. It had to elevate in a way. And so, in a way, these neo soul artists were the ones who came through and added a bit more depth, and a bit more. They were the ones who really made you think, and the ones who gave more of a heaviness and more of a feel in humanity, and was a bit more accessible to everyday people. And they were very direct in who their audience were, which was us, us as Black people. I think one thing that was really interesting to me, specifically when we talk about Erykah writing Mama's Gun, was the fact that, so she had recently gone over to Motown for the album, and Motown wanted R. Kelly and Babyface to to help her write this album, but Badu declined, and she said that she respected their music, but that's not the parallel that she wanted to do, and she wanted to evolve. She wanted to elevate, and she said that she trusts her fans enough to evolve with her, and that was a big risk, and that was such a big step. And I think that that was uh something that a lot of these neo soul artists were doing. They were walking to the beat of their own drum, but still taking from, the what we know in of that, like, 80s, 90s R&B and hip hop sound.
Yeah, as you've been talking, Taryn, you talk about, there were so many men, I think, that were influential in the neo soul movement, right? But there, it does feel like, because we're talking about Jill Scott and Erykah Badu, but also I think India Ari, you've already mentioned Lauryn Hill. Like, there were a lot of women that were instrumental in neo soul. Can you talk about, like, the way that women and women's presence really expanded what neo soul was for us?
Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely. Again, when I think of who is Jill Scott, when I think of Mama's Gun, even albums that Macy Gray, India Ari, Lauryn Hill dropped, these were albums in which these women are talking about love, sex, relationships, politics, identity, in ways that centered themselves. They were not the side character in their own stories, which, unfortunately, in a lot of R&B, we have seen, especially R&B of, yesteryear, love those records down. But these albums, these records, felt like they had not only an empowered voice, but also a very self-aware and self-reflective voice. I even think about, Green Eyes by Erykah Badu, and that was a direct um, um, song that she wrote in 4 parts in response to her breakup with Andre 3000. Of course, they had just had their son, Seven, as she was producing and creating this album. And what was really interesting to me is the admittance of like, hey, yeah, I'm a little insecure here, and I'm going through it. I'm going through the cycles of heartbreak and of breakup and of mourning this relationship, mourning what I thought was going to be, and seeing that, okay, I need to move on, but I'm not sure exactly how to do that. There's so much power in stating that and singing that, and really going in that direction. I even think about one of my probably like toxic favorite songs, and I don't know if it's toxic, but I but Getting in the Way by Jill Scott on Who Is Jill Scott was such, when I listened to it beforehand, which is what I think is a beautiful thing about these retrospectives, when I listened to it beforehand, it felt like she was arguing about, with this woman about, like, hey, don't mess with my man. When I listen to it now, it doesn't feel like that. It feels more so like, hey, girl, I know that you have feelings for him and y'all probably got something going on. And look, no disrespect to you, but you're getting in the way of what I'm feeling. She's not saying that like it's not the boy is mine. It's you get in the way of what I'm feeling, of the love that I have for this man. And I'm being honest with you and letting you know. And I think that honesty and that vulnerability and transparency is what we see from these women. And they took the genre to such a such a different level that we see still their actions, their decisions, their lyrics in songstress are still reverberating in music that we're listening to today. I mean, these women are still on tour. Lauryn Hill just wrapped up a tour last year. Macy Gray, I feel like she stays on tour, and of course, Mama's Gun 25th anniversary tour has commenced last month, and it's just so refreshing. It was so refreshing then as little Taryn, seeing and hearing these women, listening to the adults in my life, because I was probably about like 8 when these albums came out, listening to the adults in my life embrace this music and looking up and saying, hey, like, this is what grown women listen to, like that is really how I viewed these artists back then and today, as I navigate my own troubles and heal and find uh you know solutions and reasons for why lives. These albums, these women's voices have become the solve that continues to provide, if not answers, relief, and help me feel seen in the moment.
I love that you shared like where you were in the world because we're having a very, it feels like intergenerational conversation because I was in my senior year in college when
Oh,
these albums dropped. So
wow.
I was in a very different place, right? So these albums very much feel like the soundtrack to my young adulthood, right? Like figuring out who I was as a young woman. And I love that you're saying like even years later, like you're thinking about maybe your mom and aunties listening to this music and still feeling like you can connect with it now as a young woman yourself, which I think is like just incredible that there is music that exists across time that speaks to black womanhood and black girlhood in
Hmm.
ways that are so powerful.
Yeah, I love that. I love that
Mhm.
so much.
So, you've already talked about, especially how when Jill came on the scene, it very much felt like she was kind of a very different picture of what we were seeing in terms of the video vixens. And, you've mentioned kind of women being the object of affection, but not necessarily owning their own desire. Can you talk more about how both of these albums really presented a different view of Black womanhood and kind of maybe expanded the ideas about who Black women were?
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. Because they speak to both Who Is Jill Scott and Mama's Gun speak to similar themes at the same time in very different ways, like just different avenues. And it's so interesting, like listening to them and being able to relate to both of them in very different ways. So it what I love is how much they take command of their own desires and their own desirability. And they weren't afraid. Erykah Badu and Jill Scott were not afraid to be that and to ask for that and to command that and to say, yes, I would like that in very different ways. Okay. Because Jill, one thing that I feel like we all love about Jill is how she looks at the simplicities and it makes you feel full. Jill has a way of helping you tap into your sacral chakra as a woman, and not being afraid to lean into that. This is before, the more recent movements and activists who have come out and and said, hey, women's sexual desires are a part of women's sexual health, and we need to talk about it. They are not taboo. And so that is such a beautiful thing to hear, to listen to, and to witness, sandwiched in between these stories of pain, of love, of and to hear Jill sing "He Loves Me" as a Black woman, like that will always feel revolutionary. To hear a Black woman claim that love that their partner is bestowing upon them is so beautiful. And then I think about Erykah Badu, where she's asking for, the same in a very different way on "Kiss Me on My Neck," a song that she collaborated with Jay Dilla for. He was credited as JD on the album, which I think is a cute little like nugget, because I don't know why he didn't, he chose a surname. Maybe it was to like not distract, but like I thought that was really cute. But yeah, I want you to kiss me on my neck. I want you to breathe on my neck. And that subtlety in a very different way, I think Erica sings about it in a way that, feels almost spiritual. And then even a different type of love. I think about AD 2000, in which she is singing from the perspective of Amilo Diallo, who was gunned down by police in the most brutal way in 2000. And for this woman to sing from this slain Black man's perspective and say, I don't want y'all to make, build no dilapidated buildings off of my name and name them after me, because I know that that is a passive, kind of cosmetic solution, quote unquote, to this greater injustice. Both of these albums talk about Black women's love, and I think that like that specific act of her creating AD 2000 felt like such a great metaphor for what we've seen Black women do time and time again. And that's show up in all of the fights, especially the fight that is for the sake and liberation and survival and love of our people. And so uh, I don't even know if I answered the question, because I feel like I've gone in so many different directions, but like that's such a testament to the vastness of womanhood that these two albums really speak to.
Yeah, it wasn't just one thing, right? Like I love that there is the mix of a song about, being jealous and insecure after a breakup combined with like an album that has police brutality themes, right? Like I think that it is a representation of all the things that we are thinking about and living, and a real life testament to, what was going on for them at the time. So I think in addition to like the beautiful sounds and the messages that we got from these albums, I also think that we really saw a shift in the aesthetics of
Hmm.
Black womanhood after these albums. And, I think kind of generally related to the neo soul movement. Like we saw, like you mentioned, Badu with like the head wraps, and, Jill really was embracing her natural hair. Like we saw a real shift into that. Can you talk about how the neo soul movement really kind of changed what aesthetically it looked like to be a Black woman?
I don't think that I necessarily noticed too much beforehand the women who were wearing their hair natural, but after Jill Scott and Erykah Badu and Macy Gray and all of these women started to, become more evident for me on my screen as a little girl watching BET. I do remember noticing more so women embracing their natural hair, women wearing clothes that were of and related to Black pride and the diaspora, and the dangly earrings that weren't necessarily just the bamboos and the door knockers, but also ones that were like wooden of Afro picks. And it did feel like there was a building upon of the Black Pride movement of the 60s and 70s within this era of neo soul. I even think about during the Mama's Gun promotion and tour. And I don't even necessarily think this was for promotion, because I think a lot of artists do a lot of stunts for promotion these days, but more so just because she wanted to. Erykah Badu cut her hair off. She because she wanted to a change, and she wanted to embrace her bald head. And at one of the stops for Mama's Gun tour, she revealed her bald head from underneath her signature wrap, and the crowd went wild. And I think that is something that like that points to how much our views of what is beauty, what is Black beauty, how we embrace ourselves and dress our bodies and adorn things that speak to our own pride and our own, how we self-identify within this, again, corridor of the early aughts, where, like you said, video vixens were at the helm of what we used to see as beauty and how we define it. I think that, like, you know that is so powerful to just randomly shave your head off, for people like India Ari to come out and say, I am not my hair, and make these bold declarations that, again, broke Black women out of the traditional mold that we have been seen in.
Taryn, did you get a chance to watch the verses with Jill Scott and Erykah Badu?
Yes, I
Yes.
did. I
So, as
did.
you're talking, I'm thinking about that because I think even it feels like an interesting juxtaposition while Jill and Erica are making all this music around like self identity and kind of affirming themselves and healing and what it feels like to be in love. They talked about on the verses how there was still kind of this competition that the industry was trying to set up, right? Like that there couldn't
Yep.
be a Jill and an Erica at the same time. And on the verses, I remember Erica saying, I kind of opened the doors for Erica or for Jill, right? Like I think there was some appearance that they wanted Erica to do. She wasn't available. And so she suggested Jill. And that is how Jill, I think, even got that JILLSOT moment. And so, I'm thinking about that as you're talking, that even as they are trying to make these like affirming messages, the industry is still trying to pit them against one another. And it very much
Hmm.
feels like the women of the neo soul movement had this kind of sisterhood, like collaboration kind of effort that was kind of against, it flew in the face of what the industry wanted at the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when you think about neo soul and the message of it and the drivers behind it, you know, it is in opposition of of mainstream music industry's rules, right? You know, it is. I think a lot of people, especially today, probably think of neo soul as being old school or whatever, but really it's afrofuturism, it's experimental, it's eclectic, it's so many things. And unfortunately, competition is not one of them, because it is neo soul is community, because that's the message behind it. And you know, I love that you mentioned that, because even as these two albums, who is Jill Scott and Mama's Gun, came out in the same year, the criticism between the two, like the critics absolutely tried to pit these albums against each other. Again, Jill's debut, and it was beloved, and you know, rightfully so. Mama's Gun was not only being compared to Who is Jill Scott, but it was also being compared to Baduism, which came out in 97. And critics were um, using Mama's Gun as a way to not only pit those two together, but again, pit Erykah Badu against Erykah Badu. And Erykah Badu did not let them. Erykah Badu said, okay, absolutely not. Not only am I going to celebrate Jill Scott and celebrate India Ari and celebrate Macy Gray and celebrate all of these other artists who have come out, but I'm also not going to let y'all get into my head with these numbers. Yes, I might have expected a bigger portion of the sales to come out and, you know, to surpass Baduism. But at the end of the day, I got out everything that I needed to for my own healing, for my own artistry. And when I go on tour, I see how my fans are receiving this. And I see that I feel lighter because I was able to respect my own artistry. And so I think, you know, that community, that self-empowerment is is crucial. And that is why Erykah Badu is who she is today, because she allowed herself to experiment and to be open and collaborative and accepting and warm, and you know.
I want to stay with this message of healing because, you know, now we hear more artists are much more open about like mental health and like the struggles that they're experiencing. I think this was before that time, right? Like nobody was necessarily talking about therapy and all of those things. But I do think, as you've alluded to, there are some real messages of healing and affirmation that we can find in both of these albums. Can you highlight maybe a few of those healing and affirmation themes from each of those albums?
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'll start with Who is Jill Scott, because I think that the overarching theme here feels like, to me, love and be loved. Jiltro, the first track on the album, she is introducing herself with who and what she loves. She loves herself. She loves poetry. She loves her city. She loves music. And we get to experience her through this. We get to experience what it looks like to love in these very simple moments. But we also get to experience and hear what it means to slowly, surely walk away from love that is not serving you anymore. And how fluid love is, and can be, when we have a good and healthy relationship with ourselves and don't allow ourselves to be boxed in or manipulated by societal pressures, which I think is such a huge theme for how we can, you know, view dating, relationships, love, etc. in today's social media dominant conversations, you know. And then for Mama's Gun. I love that Mama's Gun feels like a double entendre, right? She had just had her first son, Seven, and within this conversation that she talks about, again, love, identity, empowerment, politics, she is equipping herself so that she can protect her son, the future generation. And by protecting herself spiritually, emotionally, physically, she's able to carry on the future generation to greater pastures, so in higher levels that maybe she wasn't able to reach, maybe she hasn't reached yet, while also honoring the ancestors, honoring herself, and honoring the future, and honoring those feelings that don't always feel the best. She is able to show us a truth that is really why this album, and even in Jill Scott's case, who is Jill Scott, that is why these two albums are able to stand the test of time, because they were born of radical honesty that we needed to hear and that we still need to hear.
So, Taryn, as you just talked about, especially for Who is Jill Scott, like some of these conversations and how they are different from the things we might see on social media. And I'm also thinking about what it would be like for these albums to come out today. Right.
Mm,
And thinking like, would they have even felt empowered to be as transparent and vulnerable as they
yeah.
were, given, you know, how people would react maybe online? Like, what are your thoughts around, could we get a Who is Jill Scott or Mama's Gun today?
I want to be so optimistic, Joy. Dr. Joy, I want to be so optimistic, but I don't know. I don't think so, especially when we consider where the music industry is going and how numbers dominated and numbers driven, things have become. Unfortunately, we're getting albums that are so rich in the messages they tell, and even the talent that newer neo soul artists bring. But unfortunately, I don't think they are rising to meet the expectations of music execs, unfortunately, because they don't have the TikTok numbers, or because, they may not appeal, quote unquote, to what they think audiences want aesthetically or sonically. I think about Ari Lennox, and I love her so much. Like, I think that she is one of the most amazing newer neo soul artists that we have today. And Shea Butter Baby was so amazing. It was such a great album. Um, but the deal that she was in with Dreamville was not serving her artistry in the way that I think that she needed and wanted it to. And so, fortunately, she just got out of that. And so hopefully she'll be able to create more of the music that is of her heart, and what she really wants, because she's aligned with Solange now. But yeah, I mean, again, we're still hearing a lot of the influence and a lot of the inspiration, you know, via artists like Anderson Paak. Even Beyonce has sampled and, interpolated songs from both of these albums. But unfortunately, I don't know if the industry as a business really appreciates what these albums would be able to do if they were released today.
So you mentioned Ari Lennox, and she is definitely somebody I think about when I think about like the legacy of Erykah Badu and Jill Scott. Who are some other artists that you think about when you think about like people continuing to walk in these footsteps?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if you've heard of Ray Khalil.
No.
She is an amazing up and coming artist. She's currently actually on tour with Anderson Paak, and she sings and raps and feels so Erykah Badu coded, and it's so beautiful and refreshing to see. I believe she's a queer woman as well, and to hear her sing about so many of these themes that we've mentioned on both of these albums in a way, it from her perspective, as a Black queer woman, is so refreshing and something that I think we need more of and we need to hear more of. And I really want her to win so badly. I think she skews a little bit more pop, but her, and I say she skews a little bit more pop right now because I think, she's being pushed in that direction a bit more, as we've unfortunately been seeing with a lot of neo soul artists. But her debut album was amazing, and it felt like it spoke to so many of these themes that we were talking about, in a more airy way, than a earthy way. And I think like the different levels of neo soul we're seeing, more artists play with, which is really amazing. Yeah, who are you listening to, Dr. Joy?
So, as you were talking, I was thinking about Alex Isley, but I feel
Yes.
like, I mean, she's a Isley, so I feel like she is a very like pure R&B, like
Yeah.
crooner to me,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
feels like she could kind of maybe play in this neo soul kind of space.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's also like the beautiful thing of it, especially today, is we are seeing more artists kind of genre blend and bend and play in different directions, and maybe they're stronger in or you like one portion of their sound more than others, and which is okay because we can pick and choose, and that's the beauty of streaming. It has a lot of it has a lot of pitfalls, but at least we have the power of choice.
So, Taryn, as we wrap up, I definitely want to get some kind of quick ideas from you about, for people who maybe are just now being introduced to Mama's Gun and Who is Jill Scott, where would you suggest they start on each of these albums?
From the top. But if definitely start from the top. But if I okay, I'm gonna start with Who is Jill Scott. I would say my favorite. I'm gonna give them my favorite of like what moves me. I'm gonna again say Slowly Surely for Who is Jill Scott, because I think that it's such an affirming, self-assured, for lack of a better term, way to say, I'm not doing this. And I don't think that has to, you know, be exclusive to romantic relationships. I think that can, be for friendships. I think that could be for relationships with um, job or whatever your work is, or, it's such an amazing song because it draws a boundary in the sand in such a definitive way that I have to like I have to give that to anyone, especially the younger kids, because I know they like shorter songs and it's a shorter song. So I'm like, I'm gonna respect your attention span. Start there. And then for Mama's Gun, oh my God, Orange Moon. Orange Moon. I have to say Orange Moon. It's so beautiful. It makes me cry a lot because you could take it several ways of, her talking about, like love with her partner, but also it could be love with herself, and, how she shines brighter when she sees herself, because the sun is herself, or the mirror. And I mean, relationships are mirrors anyway for ourselves, but like to hear love from the perspective of how it makes you better and how it makes you see yourself better and in a different light is so beautiful to me. So I think that like both of these tracks could, of course, relate to so many things, but I think the, again, self-centeredness of it all, which so many of us Black women need more of, is like A1.
I love those. And I love that my answers are very different, but not that different, right? So
Oh,
for
I want to
Mama's
hear.
Gun, I would have to choose Bag Lady, right? Like I feel like that was
Mm-hmm.
the cranes in the sky before we got cranes in the
It
sky,
really
right? Like the
was.
very first song that was really talking, I think, about boundaries without calling them that, right? And thinking
Yeah.
about to how we can be more self-centered and how to pay attention to what we're carrying. So it would have to be that. And then for Who is Jill Scott, I think it would be The Way, because that probably is one of the most beautiful
Mm.
songs still ever to have been
Hmm.
created. So I just love that song.
I love that. I wanted to give some deep cuts for the people because I'm like,
You're
I know
right, to
how
force
y'all
them to go listen to the
I
other
know
things,
how
huh?
y'all like to avoid deep cuts. So I'm like, but I love that you gave those two because I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
So when you think about like the next 25 years of R&B and neo,
Yeah.
so what do you think we have to look forward to, especially as we think about the foundation that has been laid by these women and many others?
Ooh, I really, especially now, because we know that industry budgets are shrinking. And with that, we are seeing, and I think we're going to hear so many more self starters, so many more people putting their music out there. I mean, we already had so much of that and are continuing to have so much of that with, SoundCloud, YouTube, TikTok, just different platforms where we can find newer artists. Um, and I think a lot of these artists, these newer artists, are walking in the steps of neo soul. Um, and what's interesting is what I've been seeing is that, like, it doesn't matter, like, whether you're Black or not, like, neo soul is inspiring so many different people of different races and backgrounds. And that just speaks to the value and longevity of Black music, of the music and the culture that we make. And I think that that's something that we're going to continue to see. I think we're going to continue to see artists pay homage to these albums and sample these albums and tap these artists for their songs. I think about Erykah Badu. She stays on a younger artist album. She has a really great song, a couple of great songs with Drum, and I think that we're going to see more of that. More of the younger generations tapping directly into these artists to not only sample but also lend their voices and ears to them. But yeah, I think that in 25 years we are going to be having the same conversation about Solange's albums and about Ari Lennox albums and so many of these artists who they're well established, of course, but that are of younger generations who are slowly but surely getting their flowers from us.
Okay, I have a few quick like fill in the blank questions for you to do for social. You game?
I am.
Okay. So what's the first song you think of when you hear the word neo soul?
Send It On by D'Angelo. Yes, absolutely.
Whose concert would you travel the farthest to see, Jill Scott or Erykah Badu?
I'm gonna have to say Jill Scott. I'm gonna have to say Jill Scott. Oh my God. Should I say Jill Scott? Is it Erykah Badu? I'm gonna say Jill Scott because I haven't seen Jill Scott in a while. And I just saw Erykah Badu, and I probably am gonna go see Erykah Badu again next month. So yes, final answer, Jill Scott.
Okay. Is there a lyric from either Mama's Gun or Who is Jill Scott that still lives in your head rent free?
Pack Light.
Good one. Which track is the ultimate self care anthem, Bag Lady or Slowly Surely?
Bag Lady. Definitely Bag
The
Lady.
most underrated cut from either album.
Clever. I know it was a single, but I feel like it didn't get as much love as it deserved. Definitely Clever from
Okay.
Erykah Badu.
Whose style would you say influenced you more back in the day, Jill's cozy chic or Badu's bohemian bold?
I think Jill's Cozy Chic.
Which artist today feels like the closest spiritual descendant of Badu or Scott?
Ooh. I'm again gonna say Ray Khalil. She feels like Badu's niece. Like I have to say that. Like she like from the dress to the stage presence to the singing rap, like I have to say her. Yeah.
Finish this sentence. Neo Soul is the soundtrack to.
Black Love.
Love that. Thank you, Taryn. So, as you were talking about the closest spiritual descendant, I'm reminded of during the pandemic, we saw a TikTok of Puma singing with her mother. And so when we
Yes.
talk about a spiritual descendant, there is an actual descendant now. I feel like Puma is in a very different space, right? Like her music is very different. And I could see, like, you're Badu's daughter. You don't want to be the next Badu. But if
Right.
she wanted to, I feel like she could take that
She really
mantle.
could. Puma, oh my God, thank you for reminding me of that, because I don't think I've seen much from her recently. But Puma, if she wanted to take it, she's going to take it. Like how she sounds heavenly.
This has been so much fun to chat with you about this, Taryn. I love the things that you shared about these albums. Can you please remind us, where can we stay connected with you? What is your website, your Substack, and your social media handles?
Thank you so much. This has been so fun, Dr. Joy. Y'all can find me at underscore tearing it up on TikTok, Instagram, and that other website that man has taken over that I probably will be deactivating soon. Um, and you also can find me on Substack at letsstayconnected.substack.com, or on tarynfinley.com. And yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Joy, once again.
Thank you, Taryn.